Okay, so we're doing the book of Ruth, right? Page 1269 in the art scroll, right? We read the book of Ruth on the holiday of Shavuot. So the first question is why? One reason is given because Ruth was the great-grandmother of King David, and King David, his yurtzeit is on Shavuot, right? Also, the setting of the book of Ruth is during the harvest, which is the season of Shavuot time. But I think the most important reason is because on Shavuot we want to accept the Torah. You know, we have to relive the events that happened in the past. It's not like in the secular world you commemorate events that happened, right? We have Washington's birthday, Lincoln's birthday, Independence Day. It doesn't happen to come out on a convenient day of the week. Push off to Mondays, have a nice long weekend, right? But in Judaism, we don't just commemorate, we relive, right? Some Sephardic Jews have a custom in the middle of the Passover Seder, there's a knock on the door. Guy comes carrying a sack behind his back. Where are you coming from? Mitzrayim, Egypt. Where are you going? Yerushalayim, right? They put the matzahs on their shoulders, they march around the table, they put on a whole skit to make it come alive. We don't talk about the going out of Egypt. You burn your mouth on horseradish. We go out of our house for a week and sit in the sukkah. And we stay up all night on Shavuot. We want to relive the revelation on Sinai, right? And here we have an example. A Gioris, a convertess. She was a daughter of a king. She was a princess. And she left everything to become part of the Jewish people, right? The story of Ruth is an example for us how someone has to accept the Torah. That's why we read the book of Ruth on Shavuot, right? And the gematria, the numerical value of the name Ruth is 606, right? And she had 7 mitzvahs beforehand, so 606 plus 7 equals? 613.
What do you mean she had 7 mitzvahs?
Non-Jews have 7 mitzvahs, the 7 laws of Noah, right? And now that she became Jewish, she added on 606, which is the gematria of Ruth. Okay. So the book begins, and it was in the days when the judges judged. And the rabbis say, not the judges judge the people, but the people judge the judges. Right. We have to appreciate the fact that there was a period of our history between the time of Joshua until King Saul, close to 300 years, where there was no king. It was the period of the judges. It means the country ran on the honor system for close to 300 years, right? The judge was appointed by the Sanhedrin to make decisions for the nations, go to war or not. But there was a volunteer army, and that was it. No police force, right? The people lived without a police force for 300 years, right? Pretty good. So if you look at the book of Judges, on the end of the book of Judges, there's 2 stories. The story of the concubine in Giva, Pilekesh Giva, where there was a civil war, and the story of the Pesel Micha, the idol of Micha. And it says over there, you know why these events happened? Because there was no king in Israel. Implying that had there been a central authority, he would have prevented these calamities from happening. Sounds bad there was no king, right? I mean, as my Rabbi pointed out, 2 incidents in 300 years is a pretty good track record, right? What happened in New York City one day without a police force? Even with a police force, right? Somebody once said, right? This guy was walking in Central Park late at night, and he's frightened of the buggers and the drug addicts. And he sees 2 policemen. He says, when I see you guys, I feel confident. And they said, we don't. We're scared. Right? We go in the Arab marketplace late at night, see the policemen. They're scared. Right? Anyway, so this was between the judges. It wasn't even a judge. They could do whatever they wanted, right? And there was a hunger in the land. Now we know the land of Israel is usually a fertile land, right? We don't find too many hungers, but in the Tanakh we find a number of hungers. There's a common denominator between the different ones. The first hunger was in the times of Abraham. He comes out to Egypt, there's a hunger. He comes to Israel, he goes out to Egypt, right? And as a result of that hunger, Hagar joined the Jewish people. Hagar was a great woman, a princess, a daughter of Pharaoh, and she would rather be a maidservant of Sarah than be a princess, right? Later on she messed it up, but she was a great woman. Then we find the time of Jacob, there was a hunger. As a result of that hunger, Jacob went out to Egypt, and the Erev Rav, the mixed multitude, joined us. 600,000 Egyptians, right? The cream of the crop of the Egyptians joined us, right? And here we have a third hunger, and again, as a result of that hunger, we have Ruth coming to join us. And there was a hunger in the land, and a man went from Bethlehem, Judah, that was the Meah Sharim of those days, the most religious place, right? To sojourn in the fields of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. He, right, was a catalyst. His wife came along with him, and his 2 sons, right? His name was Elimelech. So we have to say something in his favor. Elimelech was a great man, right? He was a big Torah scholar, but he didn't follow the Rambam. The Rambam says when you give charity, you shouldn't give all at once. You should give a little bit at a time. So every time you have to give, you have to overcome your Yetzer Hara, right? Say he didn't follow that. He gave once a year in the office, right? Now there's a hunger. They're knocking at his door all day long. He has no rest in his house, in the synagogue, wherever he goes. They're not giving him a minute of rest. There's a hunger. He couldn't take it. Now, there's a principle. When you're studying Torah, you only have to intervene your Torah, interfere if there's a mitzvah that no one else can do. Mitzvah, sheyev shayit echem. No one else can do it except you. But if someone else can do it, you're not required to stop learning Torah, right? I'm not the only rich man. There are other rich people. Let them do it, right? I want to study Torah. I'll go to a small town in Moab just to study Torah there. And when the hunger's over, I'll come back. That was his plan. So we're saying in his favor, right? Of course, there are midrashim that the poor people said, we're going to break down his house until still everything he has, right? And there was no judge, remember? It was between the judges, right? They can do whatever they want. That's another factor to take into consideration. In any case, he had a good reason, and he left. And his wife didn't want it, because his name was Naomi. Naomi means pleasant. She was well known for her good deeds. She always took care of poor brides and took care of all their needs. And the two sons' names were Machlon and Chilion. Machlon means sickness, and Chilion means finished, which is what happened to them in the end. Right. Ephraim, they were a distinguished, right, family, right, from Bethlehem, Yehuda. And they came to the fields of Moab, and they were there. When you leave Israel, you just go on the plane, and you're gone. You're going, right? To come back is a lot harder. You ever speak to Israelis living in America? We're coming back. A lot harder, right? I just want to show you, look a little bit ahead of them. Later on in this chapter, we notice how many words does the book of Ruth use to describe Naomi coming back to Israel? How many words does it use? She went out of the place that she was with her two daughters, and they went on the road to return to Judah, right? Then it says, and they went, both of them, until they came to Bethlehem. And when they came to Bethlehem, this happened, right? And finally she returned, right, with the daughter-in-law, who returned from the field of Moab, and they came to Bethlehem. She went, and she came, and she returned, and they returned, and they came, and finally they got back. To leave Israel, 1, 2, 3, to come back, not so easy. Okay. Back to verse 3. So even though we said Elimelech had a good intention, right? But the fact was he was a rich man, and he abandoned his people in their trouble, and God considered that a chil Hashem, and Elimelech died. The husband of Naomi, right? And the rabbis say before he died, he lost all his money, right? How is that hinted in the verse that he lost all his money? Because it calls him the husband of Naomi. Now when Rockefeller dies, they don't say, you know who died? Shirley's husband. They say Rockefeller, right? He was a nobody, he lost his money, he wasn't nothing. He was a husband of Naomi, he was very famous for her good deeds. She was, you know who died? The husband of Naomi. She's a famous woman. He lost everything, right? So what should she have done after her husband died? Tell me.
Find a redeemer for herself.
The first thing, what should she have done? Come back to Israel, right? But she remained with the two sons. It's so hard to come back, right? And they married Moabite women. One's name was Orpah and one's name was Ruth. And they lived there 10 years, temporary residence for 10 years, right? So when he was alive, he watched over his sons, make sure they studied Torah, they did everything right. When he died, they married. Now, what's this really intermarriage? Were these women converted or not? That's a big question. Because the problem is, if they were converted, so how can Naomi tell them to go back? You can't tell a convert to go back. Once you're converted, no backseats, can't go back, right? On the other hand, if they were not converted, then they weren't really married. The marriage is not valid to a non-Jew. And we see later on in the book that she was considered the wife of Machlon. Ruth was the wife of Machlon. He had to redeem the field of Machlon for her. So if she wasn't Jewish, she wasn't his wife. So I think the answer is, they did go through a conversion process. It wasn't like today where people just marry out. There was a conversion. The question was whether they were sincere. Naomi was questioning their sincerity. So she's going to test them to go back. If they go back, that will show they were not sincere, so they were never Jewish in the first place. That was Orpah. But since Ruth stayed with her, that showed she was sincere in the first place. Therefore, she was still married, and therefore she was considered the wife of Machlon. But these two guys did not have such good intention, and they also died. They both died, Machlon and Chilion, and she remained from her two sons. Her two sons and her husband. Now go back. She had two sons, Machlon and Chilion, implying who was the older one? Machlon. And they married women, Orpah and Ruth, right? Now we know Machlon was the husband of Ruth. So who married Orpah? Chilion. So who married first? The younger brother married first, right? It says they took wives, Orpah and Ruth, right? So that means Chilion married Orpah first, and then Machlon married Ruth, right? And they died. Who died? Machlon and Chilion. Who died first? Machlon. So if they're dying for marrying these women, shouldn't Chilion have died first? He was the one who married first. He married Orpah first. Why did Machlon die first? Right? You hear the question, right? Hear the question, Benjamin, right? And the answer is very good, right? You see, if the older brother Machlon would have married first, and he got a good wife, Ruth, you couldn't really blame the younger brother. He's following his brother's footsteps. He got a good wife, maybe I'll get a good wife too. But the younger brother married first, and he got a schlock. He got Ruth, he got Orpah, right? The older brother, what are you doing following after your younger brother? You should say no, all right? You followed after your younger brother, you got killed first. Right? He died first, right? He's worse. Got it? So she remained from her 2 sons and her husband, and she got up with her daughter-in-laws, and she returned from the fields of Moab, right? Could they return? They were never there before. She's returning. They're accompanying her. Because she heard in the field of Moab that God remembered his people to give them bread. You see the language of the prophet. It doesn't say she heard the famine is over. God remembered his people to give them bread, right? Right? She saw Jaffa oranges on the market stand. She knew that the famine was over. Okay. And they went out that place. First things out of this place, right? This place is bad. My husband died. My wife died. Out of this place, right? To return to the land of Judah. And she said to her 2 daughter-in-laws, go return every woman to her mother's house. Right. Now, before we start, hold on, I'll ask you a question. These 2 women were princesses, the rabbi say. They were the daughters of Eglon, the king of Moab, right? They could have been in a palace. They married these 2 Jewish boys. They were so poor when they died that the daughter-in-laws had to pay, had to wait for the husband's funerals, the rabbi say. They had to pay for their shrouds. They didn't have money, right? So they could go back, to the palace. But they're choosing to return with this old widow to a foreign country. They don't know the country, they don't know the language, they don't know the customs. Their chances of getting married there are very slim, right? And she doesn't have any money, right? If we were a Bestin, if we were a court, and we had to decide if these converts are sincere, what would we say? Are they sincere? What would you say?
Yes.
Definitely, right? They're not getting anything. They're just losing. They're not getting anything. Of course they're sincere. But Naomi did not take that for an answer. Judaism, what's unique about Judaism? We're the most liberal religion of all the religions. We're the most liberal religion there is. All the other religions, right? We're the only religion that promises heaven to non-members. Every other religion, you got to be a member. Got to be a Catholic, got to be a Protestant, got to be Mormon, or a Buddha, or a Buddhist, or a Hindu, or a Muslim, and you'll hear the music playing and the drums beating, and you'll see the light, guaranteed, or your money back. But when the non-Jew comes together, we tell them it's not necessary, right? Keep the 7 laws of Noah, live a moral life, you go to heaven. We promise heaven to non-members, right? You want to be a Jew, right? There's 7 and 613. We cannot refuse a convert. Do you know that? As long as it's sincere. Truth, we give converts a very hard time. Make sure that they want to marry a Jewish boy, Jewish girl. Once we're convinced this person sincerely wants to keep the Torah, we must accept them. They can be black, red, makes no difference, right? So she has to talk them out of it. So she says to her daughter-in-law, she says, go return every woman to her mother's house. Go back to mommy. May God do with you kindness as you did to me and with the dad. You paid for the funerals after all, right? I'm sure when they were alive, she didn't have a good relationship with them. She was very angry at them for marrying non-Jewish, these Moabite women. But now their husbands are dead, so it's not their fault. May God give you should find rest, every woman in her husband's house. That's what she said. First she said, go back to mommy. You want rest, you know what you should do? Get married, have 10 kids. Does that make sense? What do you have more rest? Going back to mommy or getting married, having kids? What's bigger rest? Going to mommy. How come it says menucha isha beis isha, right? And the answer is it doesn't mean physical rest. Of course, you get more physical rest. You go to mommy and sleep all day. A woman has to have inner peace. If a woman doesn't have a husband and a family, she's not at peace with herself. If you want to go to sleep, go back to mommy. But I'm telling you advice. If you want to have rest, if you want to have inner peace, get married, have a family. And she kissed them. They lifted up their voices and they cried. 3 women crying on a little side road in Moab, and Jewish history is being made. And they said to her, no, with you we'll return to your people. At this point, if we were a Bestin, would we accept them? Are they considered? Right? She told them to go back, and they said, no, we're staying. What do you say? Would we accept them? Yes, we would. But not Naomi, not the Rebbetzin, no, right? She said, return my daughters. Why should you go with me? Do I have sons in my womb for you to marry, right? Return my daughters, go. I'm too old to be to a man. I said, do I have any hope? Even if it was tonight to a man, even if he had birthed the sons tonight. What are the odds of an old lady, old widow getting remarried? 1 in 1,000. Getting remarried tonight, 1 in 10,000. Having sons, the computer explodes. And even if I had sons tonight, would you wait till they grow up to marry? You'll be over childbearing grave. You won't have any children, right? No way. Even if I had sons tonight, right? Will you wait for them until they grow up, right? You'll be ungunas, you'll past childbearing range, right? Not to be married. No, my daughters, it's bittered me very much. The hand of God has been upon me. And they lifted up their voices and they cried again. 3 women crying in a little road. And Jewish history is being made. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law and Ruth clung to her. Orpah said, you're my mentor. You're my Rebbetzin. You teach me wisdom. You're right. A woman has to have inner peace. I have to get married. With you, there's no chance. I got to go. And she kissed her and she left. And what did Ruth say? Yes, married. No, married. Yes, children. No, children. Torah! I want to be a Jew. I want to be part of the Jewish people. I don't care. I'm not married. Yes, married. I want to be a Jew. That's the most important thing to me. I'm staying. Right? And the rabbis say many years later there was a battle. The great-grandson of Orpah and the great-grandson of Ruth met on the battlefield. Because Orpah went back that day, she had relations with many men, and she had a great-grandson named Goliath, who cursed God. And David fought with Goliath. And the rabbis say it's fitting that the grandson of the one who clung to Naomi should be victorious over the one who kissed and left. So we see here Jewish history is being made. Okay, so Orpah leaves. At this point, if we were Besdin, we had to decide, is Ruth sincere or not? Will we accept her as a bride? What do you say? What do you say at this point? Of course, definitely, right? Not Naomi, we're still not ready to let her go. And she said, behold, your companion has returned to her people, to her God. Go also with her. Why don't you go too? And Ruth's very famous expression, don't entreat me to leave you, to return from behind you. Where you goeth, I will go. Where you sleep, I will sleep. Your people are my people. Your God is my God. Where you die, I will die. There I'll be buried. So shall God do to me, and so shall he increase, because only death will separate between me and you. I'm going to be a Jew in any case, but I'd rather be together with you. And the rabbis learn from here an interesting thing, that when you're a convert, you have to inform him while he's converting some of the laws. He has to know what he's getting into, right? Some of the hard ones, some of the easy ones, did you have an idea? So from the reply that she said, we learned what Naomi told her. First thing Naomi told her was that, we can't go out of the dowry of Shabbos. It's more than 2,000 cubits. Where you go, I will go. You can't be alone with someone of the opposite sex. Where you sleep, I will sleep, right? You can't worship idols. Your God is my God, right? There's a death penalty. Where you die, I will die. There's separate cemeteries for those who got a death penalty. There I'll be buried. She accepted it all, right? At this point, even Naomi was ready to accept her. One last test, verse 18. And she saw that she was struggling to go with her, and she started speaking to her. How was Naomi going? An old lady, a Rebbetzin, she lost her family, she's crying, she's saying to him, she's davening like this, she's walking like this. How did Ruth walk? Like a typical non-Jewish girl walks, right? But she saw how Naomi was walking. She's trying to emulate it. She's also trying to daven. She's not a daven. She was trying to everything. She was struggling to emulate her. When she saw that, she stopped speaking to her. Okay, now she accepted her. And they went, both of them, until they came to Bethlehem. Next page. And they came to Bethlehem, the entire city came upon them. And they said, is that Naomi? First of all, why is the entire city there when they come? And second of all, is that a way to talk to an old widow who's suffering, who's poor? That's Naomi. She was so beautiful. She was so rich. Look at her now, an old hag. Too embarrassing the women from Meir Sharim, from Bethlehem. That's how you talk to a woman. And the rabbis say no.
Like widows.
What?
It's a prohibition.
So right. So the rabbis say what happened. When Ruth said she was your God is my God, the wife of Boaz was the judge. His wife died, and the next day was a funeral. So the cemetery was outside the town. The entire city came to the funeral of the wife of the judge. Right in the middle of the funeral, they look up and they see two women walking down the street. Who are they? One of them doesn't even look Jewish, right? And the other one looks very familiar. 1 second, could it be? 1 second, could that? Why? Is that Naomi? Why? It was spontaneous. They didn't mean to embarrass her, right? Here she was so beautiful and young, and then all of a sudden she's all in rags. How could that be? Could that be Naomi? Is that Naomi? Right? And she said, don't call me Naomi, which means pleasant. Call me Mora, bitter, because God has been bitter to me. I went full and God has returned me empty-handed. Don't call me Naomi. God is... And Ruth is hearing her mentor saying confession. I sinned, right? And they returned. They came and they returned. They came and they returned. Returned from the field of Moab. They came to Bethlehem, the beginning of the harvest of the barley. But no, so Elimelech had a field, but he hadn't been there for 10 years. Nobody planted it. There was nothing to grow. They didn't have any food. Chapter 2. Naomi had a relative from her husband's side. His name was a man of valor. His name was Elimelech, family of Elimelech. His name was Boaz. Boaz was the nephew of Elimelech, also the nephew of Naomi. Naomi's father and Elimelech were brothers. He married his brother's daughter, his niece. And she could have gone to him and say, give me money, right? But it was beneath her dignity, right? She was a very famous, proud woman. She's going to go ask for beg. He should come to me. I'll go to him, right? So Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, let me go in the field and pick after those I found favor, right? She asked permission from her mentor, from her Rebbetzin, to go pick. How was charity given in the olden days when we had harvest? Leket shichapeya. They would put aside one corner of the field for the poor. And they could either divide it up equally or grab as much as they can. Then when they would cut the grain, if 1 or 2 grains fell down to the floor, they had to leave it for the poor. 3 or more, they could take it back. That's called leket. And then when they made bundles, they would come back, and if they forgot 1 or 2 bundles behind them, they had to leave it for the poor. 3 or more, they'd go back and get it. Right? So the more people, they're called the gleaners, they would follow after the harvesters and pick up whatever they left. So Ruth asked permission from her Rebbetzin, can I please go out and pick after the... I know you're not going to go because you're embarrassed. Everybody knows you, right? It's embarrassing. You were once rich, but me, nobody knows me. Let me go. She asked her permission. And what if she would have said no? Right? 2 days later, 2 more funerals, and that would be the end of the book of Ruth. Luckily, she said yes. Okay, she said yes. Right? And she gave her permission, and she went. And she went, and she came, and she ticked in the field after the harvesters, and she happened to be in the field of Boaz, the family of Elimelech. So what does it mean? She went and she came. What does that mean? She went and she came. Telich v'tovo. So one interpretation is she was afraid she might get lost on the way back, coming back late at night. She didn't want to get lost. She went first, and she made signs for herself how to find her way back. She went one time, and then she went a second time to make sure she knew how to get back. That's a simple answer. The rabbis say she was looking for a group that she felt comfortable with. She didn't got to go any poor people. She wanted to go with poor people that were modest, that didn't speak Lashon Hara. She was looking for a group that's appropriate for her, right? Now, there was a famine for 10 years. This is the first harvest. If you get there late, they ain't gonna be nothing left, right? She was waiting for a group. I'll give you an analogy. A lady in Meir Sharim with 10 children, right? She reads in the newspaper, there's a sale in Tel Aviv, a store's giving everything half price, one day. She has a daughter, 12-year-old daughter, wake up tomorrow early, take the first bus to Tel Aviv, here's money, buy whatever you can. Okay, the daughter gets up 6 o'clock in the morning, goes to the bus stop. 2 hours later, the mother passes the bus stop, and she's the daughter still at the bus stop. What are you doing at the bus stop? You're supposed to go to Tel Aviv. Mommy, I saw the people on that bus, as my mother wouldn't want to be on that bus with those kind of people, right? Get the next bus, same thing. Next bus, same thing. I'm still looking for a bus. By the time you get to Tel Aviv, there'll be nothing left. It's a one-day sale. But Mommy, I did bring you something from Tel Aviv. I knew I could trust you. What did you bring me from Tel Aviv? I brought you the modesty of your daughter. That's worth more than all the sales in Tel Aviv, all the bargains, right? Ruth waited till she had a special group she could go with, right? And did she lose anything on the deal? She made the best shidduch in Tanakh. She got to marry Boaz, right? This guy, great guy, okay? The Vilna Gaon is the third interpretation. So when she went and she came, if I pick, my house is over here, and I pick by the time I get to the field, I have to schlep it all back. She went to the end of the field, and she picked backwards towards her house. That way she'd be closer to her house when she got back, right? She went and she came. She went to the end of the field and fasted, right? She's going fundraising the first time in her life, and she knows all the tricks. You have fundraisers. With experienced fundraisers, know who to go to and when to come. Guys, the first time they come, they knock on my door. They think I have money. They don't know, right? She's going the first time, and she knows all the tricks. So why does the book of Ruth tell us that? She wasn't stupid. She was very intelligent. So why'd she ask permission from her Rebbetzin to go? Because you have to have a Rebbetzin. You have to ask permission. You can't just go on your own. And she came to the field of Elimelech, right? The Boaz. Next verse 4, right? And Boaz came from Bethlehem, and he saw the harvest. He said, God be with you. He wanted to raise his spirituality. And Boaz says to the lad in charge of his soldiers, to who is this girl? And the rabbi says, what's Boaz doing looking at girls? Right? An old man with a long white beard, the Satmar Rabbi, he wouldn't even notice her. What's he doing looking at girls? Right? So the Bible has an interesting answer to this question. He says, there were 3 things I told you. If you were a poor guy, you want to get the most grain, where's the best place to go? The payah. Payah grab is what you want, right? What's second best? The shikha, the bundles, right? Each bundle's worth $50. And the least is the lekah, the individual grains. So Ruth said, look, if I go to the payah, the poor people are going to fight with me. Who are you? What are you doing? You're not even Jewish. Why are you getting our grain? They're going to fight with me. I don't want to fight with them. If I go to the shikha, each one of these bundles worth $50, the workers will fight with me. I didn't forget it. You didn't forget it. I didn't forget it. I'll go to the lekah, the individual grains. No one's going to bother me. I don't want to fight with anybody. I'll just pick over there. It seems she was the only one by the leket, right? Comes Boaz on the field. He sees 100 poor people by the payah, 100 by the shikha. Only one girl by the leket. She's picked the whole. She was the only one there. She picked the whole bunch. To who is this girl? Lemi. She must be related to one of the harvesters. Maybe it's his sister, his daughter. He's throwing her my grain. Who's the guy giving my grain away? Lemi. Who's this girl? Who is this girl? Who's she related to? That's what the Bible says. But the rabbis answer the question differently. The rabbis say, why do you notice her? Because she was very modest. She didn't bend over. She stooped down in a modest way. She kept the halacha. She only kept 2 and not 3. Right. So the question is, how does he answer the question? What's he doing looking at modest girls? Shouldn't look at modest girls either, right? What's he doing looking at girls? Right. So our Rabbi said, you have to understand. This was the first harvest after a 10-year famine. The women in Meir Sharim, the children were starving. Do you think they were paying attention to the halacha? They were just grabbing. They weren't stupid. They were just grabbing whatever they could grab. Only one girl was keeping the halacha. Only one girl was modest. Only one, she had 2 over here, 1 over there. Is that 2 or 3? She measured it, went to ask the rabbi, came back, was going. Only one girl was keeping the law. You know why? She must have a teacher. Lemi hanara. To who is this girl? Who is her mentor? Who is her teacher? She must have someone who sat down, and she did have. Naomi sat down and taught her the laws. Make sure you're modest. Make sure you keep the halacha. Right. And he said to her, the lad in charge, yes, she's a Moabite woman that returned with Naomi from the field of Moab. And she said, let me pick a little bit and gather. She sat down now. And Boaz says to Ruth, behold, I've heard my daughter, don't go to pick in any other fields. Don't pass away from here. Stay with my maids. Notice my maids. He had female harvesters. With my maids, stay with the women, right? Your eyes in the field, which you're cutting, which you're picking, right? And go after them. I told the boys to leave you alone, not to touch you. If you're thirsty, you can drink from the water, right? And she fell on her face and she bowed down and she said, why have I found favor in your eyes to recognize me? I'm a stranger. And Boaz says, it was told to me what you did to your mother-in-law after the death of your husband. She calls him a husband. He was related. She was considered married to Machlon. And you left your father, your mother, your land, your birthday. You left everything behind to go to an old widow. She's going to die soon. You'll be all alone. No husband, no children. Right. From day that you didn't know, nation you know yesterday before, may God pay you back for your deed. Your reward shall be complete from the God of Israel that you came under his wings. And she said, I have favor in your eyes, my master. You've comforted me. You've spoken on the heart of your maidservant. I'm not like one of your maidservants. And Boaz said, when they came to eat, come and eat. Even says what the menu is. They dip their pita in vinegar, right? That's good on a hot day, right? And she ate and she was satisfied and she put away doggy bag for her mother-in-law. Right? She put away for her mother-in-law some food. And she got it to pick. And Boaz told his lads, let her pick between the sheaves and don't embarrass her. And throw a little bit more to her, right? Don't yell at her, right? And she picked, but she had 2 or 3. She didn't take any more, only 2, right? 3 till the evening. And she beat it. She had a whole big amount of barley. And she lifted it up and she came to the city. And her mother-in-law saw that she had picked, right? And she gave her what was left over from her food. Now, 1 second. She gave her what was left over. Is that a nice thing? Here, I had some leftovers. Take it. She said, I brought you special food, right? Leftovers, right? And the answer is because Naomi was sensitive. She didn't want to take favors. She didn't want to take charity. She said, I don't want you buying things from me. No, you happen to have leftover. You know, it's going to go to waste anyway. You may as well eat it. You know, it's going to go to waste, right? She was sensitive to Naomi's feelings, right? I left over. You can have. You may as well eat it. You know, no one's going to eat it anyway, right? And she said to her mother-in-law, her mother said to her, where did you pick today? Who's the guy who paid you? Looks like you got a salary. May God bless, may he recognize be blessed. And she told him, the man I spoke to, his name is Boaz. And Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, blessed he to Hashem, who has not left his kindness to the living and the dead. Naomi, he's our relative, he's our redeemer. Now what does it mean he's our redeemer? So we know in the Torah there's a law called Yibum, right? Yibum means levirate marriage. If a man dies without children, the Torah considers having children to be the main purpose of a marriage. It's not the only purpose of a marriage, Couples if can't have children, they still have a very successful marriage, but it's the main purpose. If a man dies, if he has a brother, the Torah says the brother should marry the widow, right? And if they have a child, it's considered as if it's a child of the dead brother. But if he doesn't want to marry her, it's not a good idea. Say she's much older, she's much younger. There's a ceremony called chalitza, which he takes off his shoe and she spits on the floor, and that removes that obligation, right? Now here it wasn't really yibum because there were no brothers. The brothers died, right? But a similar thing is called geula. We learned in the parsha a few weeks ago, if a man sells his inheritance field, if he has a relative, the relative has a mitzvah to buy it back, to redeem it. And if the one who sold it was a widow, right? It was a mitzvah. The custom was to marry the widow. The one who redeemed the field would marry the widow, similar to Yibum. And that way they remember the husband on the field. That was the field that belonged to Machlon. It was similar to Yibum, right? Since we're talking, they say he's our relative, he's going to have to redeem the field, he's going to have to marry you, right? Now, since we're talking about Yibum, I'll tell you a story. The famous story in the book of Kings of King Solomon. King Solomon, the wisdom of King Solomon. There were 2 women who gave birth at the same time. And they were sleeping in the same room with their babies, right? One in the middle of the night, one of the women accidentally suffocated her baby. Wakes up in the middle of the night, her baby's dead. Went over to the other woman and switched babies. Next morning, the other woman wakes up, my baby's dead. It's my baby, it's my baby. They come to King Solomon, it's my baby. And Solomon said, cut him in half, you get half, and you get half. And the false mother says, good idea, you don't get him, I don't get him. The real mother says, don't kill my baby, give him to her. And Solomon said, she's the real mother. You ever heard that story before? Yeah. Book of Kings? Have you heard the one about the mother-in-laws? There were 2 mother-in-laws fighting over the son-in-law. She says, my son-in-law. Then my son said, cut him in half. One said, no, don't kill him. I said, yeah, cut him in half. She's the real mother-in-law. I just made that one up now. Okay, anyway. But there's a question on that story. What's the question on that story? How does that story show us the wisdom of Solomon, right? The other woman, who's the false mother, doesn't she know her mother loves her baby, right? She should have also said, don't kill him. They both should have said, give it to her. And he still would not know who the real mother is. How did Solomon know in advance that the false mother was going to say, kill the baby? She should also have said, don't kill him. They both should have said, don't kill him, right? How did he know? There's a number of answers to that question, but the commentary mirrors a beautiful answer. He says, these weren't any 2 women. It was a mother-in-law and a daughter-in-law who gave birth at the same time. Now, to you people, that sounds very strange, because in your society, we have small families, that's not too common, right? In our society, we have big families. It's very, my brother has 12 children, when his oldest son got married, his wife was still having babies. That's so far-fetched, right? So the daughter-in-law and mother-in-law had babies at the same time, right? And the daughter-in-law's baby died, and after her baby died, her husband died. Which means her husband died without children. They have to have their yipum, right? The only problem was her husband didn't have any brothers. There were no brothers. The only brother her husband had was the mother-in-law's baby. The mother-in-law's baby was her husband's brother. He has to marry her, but she has to wait till that baby grows up to be 13 years old to either marry or make the chalitza ceremony. For 13 years, she cannot get remarried. So she had a good idea. You know what I'll do? I'll switch babies. That way, first of all, my husband left a son. Second, there's no brother. That's what Solomon figured out. Solomon says, if I say kill the baby, she'll say, great idea, right? She's trying to fool everybody. It's her son. If the king kills the baby, then there's no baby, there's no brother. Then she can legally get remarried. So he said, kill the baby. She said, great idea. That's how we do. In any case, so he told her she's our redeemer. You've got to. He hasn't forgot his mercy from the right, living, and from the dead. You see, if you marry the widow, it's a continuation of the soul of the dead husband. That's why it means. That's what she means when she says over there that he's our redeemer, right? He hasn't left his. Verse 20 on page 1250-71. He hasn't left his kindness from the living and from the dead. He's our redeemer. And Ruth said, he told me to stay with his lads that are with him until I finish all the harvest. Is that what he told her? Hold on 1 minute. Look at verse 21 where she said, stay with my workers, the male workers, right? Go back to verse 8, there he says, with Norosai, my maid, stay with the female workers. She wasn't used to this separation of sexes, boys and girls. They're all together, right? Boys, girls, what's the difference, right? So immediately Naomi corrects her. And Naomi said to her, no, good, my daughter, stay with his maids, with the girls, not with the boys. And don't go in the other field. And did she follow her advice? What does it say in verse 23? And she stuck with the maids of Boaz to pick until they finished the harvest of the barley and the wheat. And she had a lot of friends. She could have gone out at night. She returned to her mother. She stayed loyal to her mother. Chapter 3. And Naomi said to her mother-in-law, my daughter, the time has come to find the rest which will be good for you. So what does rest mean? We said before. What does rest mean? Inner peace. It's time for you to get married. Till now, she didn't get married. Why? Because there's a halacha that a convertess has to wait for 3 months. She didn't get married. Maybe she was pregnant. Even if she was away from her husband before, it doesn't make a difference. The same thing, a divorcee or a widow, we don't allow them to get married until they wait for 3 months, because in case they're pregnant and she has a baby from the second husband, we won't know if it's a 7-month baby or a 9-month baby. We won't know who the father is, right? So we make them wait 3 months. After 3 months, you can tell if a woman's pregnant. So 3 months are over. Now it's time for you to get married. I found rest for you. And she said, behold, Boaz, our relative, you were with his maidservants. He's winnowing in the field, right? Wash yourself and smear yourself and put on your Shabbos dress, nice clothes, and go out in the fields where he's going to spend the night there. He was afraid of people stealing his crops, so he spent the night there. When he lies down, see the place where he's lying and come and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do after that. Now, Ruth did not consider this to be a very modest thing to do, right? She didn't really think that was a great thing to do. Go lie in the guy's bed. But the Rebbetzin said, go. And she said to her, whatever you tell me, I will do. I follow my Rebbetzin. Right? But she changed it a little. She went down and she didn't get dressed up first. We all dressed up. We going to a wedding, have a date today, right? She went in her normal clothes. She put her good clothes in her bag. And then when she went down, then she dressed over there, right? Now, what's the idea of uncovering the shoe? Uncovering his feet. Similarly to Yipum, by Chalitza, she takes off the shoe. What's the idea of the shoe? So the Kabbalists say, there are many levels of soul. We have the Ruach, the spirit. We have the Nefesh, like the animals have. We have Neshama, Yechida. The highest level of soul is barely attached to the body. In fact, an analogy of the soul being attached to the body could be the shoe. Are you in your shoe? Yes, but just a small part of you, just your foot, right? The soul is attached to the body like the shoe. So if you marry the widow and the dead husband has a continuation, he has a continuation. But if you don't marry him, you're disconnecting the soul from this world. The analogy of taking off the shoe is disconnecting the soul from this world. Right? So if he doesn't want to marry the widow, take off the shoe. Similarly, she's uncovering his feet, hinting to him, if you don't marry me, my husband will not have a continuation. You're uncovering the feet, you're taking off the shoe of my husband, you're disconnecting my husband from this world. That's the hint over there. And if he would have just asked him, he would have said, I'm an old man, let her find somebody else. But Ruth wouldn't find him. No one would marry her, right? They didn't know she was a Moabite. We'll come to that soon about the idea of Moabite, right? He's the only one who could do it, right? So she went to the field, right? And she lied down, right? And Boaz ate and drank, verse 7, and he went. His heart was good, and he went to sleep, right? And she, in the middle of the night, he uncovered his feet, and she lied there. In the middle of the night, he woke up, and he sees a woman lying at his feet. He says, who are you? He says, I am Ruth, your maidservant. Spread your wing over your maidservant because you are my redeemer. That's what Naomi wanted. He should spell it out to him, right? Otherwise he wouldn't agree, right? You're the one who has to do it. And he said, blessed are you to Hashem, my daughter. You've done even more kindness now than the first time. It's not to go after the boys. You're a young girl, go to the bar, go have some boyfriends, right? I'm an old man, you're coming to me, right? My daughter, don't be afraid. Everything you tell me, I will do, because all the people in my gate know that you're a woman of valor. Don't think someone's going to talk me out of it. They all know how great you are. There's only one technical problem. How indeed I am a redeemer, but there's someone close to me. I'm a nephew of Elimelech, but he's got a brother still alive who's a closer relative, and he gets the first chance, right? Spend the night. In the morning, if he will redeem you good, sometimes his name was Tov, his name was good, he doesn't say the guy's name, right? Maybe Tov, he'll redeem you Tov, will redeem you, and if not, he will not desire to redeem you, next page, then I will redeem you. As the Chai Hashem, as I live, we'll stay until the morning. And she spent the night into the morning, and the rabbi say he had a tremendous desire for her that night. After all, she's not married, he's not married, this was before the prohibition of being alone, right? She wasn't a Nida, right? And he controlled himself, it's compared to Palti ben Lachish. Palti ben Lachish was when King Saul wanted to kill David, and David had to run away. Saul took David's wife and gave her to a different man. Saul considered that David's marriage was not valid for some reason, and gave him over to a guy named Palti ben Lachish. But Palti ben Lachish felt that David's marriage was valid, right? So he didn't touch her. He lived with her years. He put a sword between their bed. I can't cross the bed, right? And then when David came and took her back, he couldn't take her back because the guy didn't touch her, right? He was crying. Why was he crying? Because he had an opportunity to overcome the Yetzer Hara, right? So similarly, Boaz had this tremendous desire, and he controlled himself until the morning. And she lay until the morning, right? And then he said, leave before it still was light. It was still dark. People shouldn't see you going. So they say rumors about the girl spending the night in the no one should see you, right? And give me your kerchief. And she put in her kerchief 6 grains of grain. Of what's 6 grains? And some say, and bring it to you. That's breakfast. That's for your breakfast. By the time lunch comes around, it'll be settled. That's one interpretation. The rabbis say he was hinting to her that we're going to have a child who's going to be Mashiach, and Mashiach is going to be famous for 6 attributes: wisdom, understanding, counsel, greatness, knowledge, fear of God. That's hinting to Mashiach is going to come from us. All right? I want to stop for a minute, point out a historical overview over here. There are 3 very strange stories in the Torah, right? And there's a common denominator between them. First strange story is the story of Lot and his daughters. Sodom is being destroyed, and Lot is saved. His wife turns around, turns a pillar of salt, right? And she sees a cave with his 2 daughters. The daughters made a dreadful mistake. They thought the whole world was destroyed, just like they heard about the flood. No world, right? The mother's dead, the father's an old man. If the father's died, they'll be the only human beings left on planet Earth. That's frightening, right? What should they do about it? So who did Cain and Abel marry? Do you know who Cain and Abel married?
Their sisters.
Their sisters. They had twin sisters, right? There was no one else. Chesed who got allowed it because there was no one else for them to marry, right? A girl once came back from a date. She told me, if that was the last man on planet Earth, I'd marry a tree. Okay? Anyway, but they had no choice, so they got their father drunk and they got pregnant from their father, right? Incest. And the older daughter called her son Moab. Moab means Me'ah, from father, right? Incest, strange story. Another strange story much later, Judah and Tamar. Judah has Tamar and marries his sons, and his sons both die. And she sees she's not going to marry the family, so she dresses herself like a prostitute, and she seduces Judah, right? Prostitute, right? Strange story, right? And the third strange story is the book of Ruth. Intermarriage, right? Here's incest, here's prostitute, here's intermarriage. What's the common denominator? Don't say sex. What's the common denominator, right?
Continuation of the joke.
King David. From Tamar, from Lot and his daughters comes Moab. From Moab comes Ruth, right? From David, from Tamar and Judah comes Boaz. Boaz marries Ruth, and 3 generations later, King David and Mashiach. Isn't that a strange way for King David to come around, right?
Well, what about the story of that Moses' dad married his aunt? Wasn't that also an inappropriate relationship?
Fine, good, but that's not related to what we're talking about now. You're right. That's not, what I'm talking about. The fact that King David came along by 3 strange acts. Isn't that strange? There must be some explanation behind that, right? And the Kabbalists say, yes, God wants to bring us King David and the Messiah, and we don't deserve it. There's a Satan up there in heaven, the prosecutor. He says, the Jews don't deserve King David. And he's right. Otherwise, guess what he said? He's right. We don't deserve him. But God in his infinite mercy wants to bring us King David in spite of that. So he's got to do it, so to speak, through the back door, when the Satan isn't looking. Oh, that's incest. That's okay. Oh, that's prostitute. That's okay. Intermarriage. All of a sudden, what do you got? King David. But Sasi David Avdi, it says, I found my cursed servant David. Where did you find him? In Sodom. It says, your daughters, Hanim Saod, the daughters that are found in Sodom. You see, Lot was a great man. he had a recessive gene. You know what a recessive gene is? The guy with the redhead, his kids aren't redheads, so his grandson comes back later. Lot was a disciple of Abraham. He got messed up. He went to his home, he got messed up, right? But that gene of Lot came back many years later through Ruth to the Jewish people, and that was King David. So God had to do it a roundabout way in order that the Satan shouldn't complain, right? See how everything's connected. Okay. So she gave her the six grains. We're on page 1272, and she came to her mother-in-law. She said, "Who are you? Didn't you know who she was? Right? It was still dark outside. She couldn't see. It's still the middle of the night, right? Who are you, right?" Then she told her what happened, what the man did, and she gave me the 6 barleys to give to you, right? And said, don't go empty-handed to your mother-in-law. And she said, "Return my daughter until we'll find out what's happening." The guy will not rest until he'll settle the matter very way. Chapter 4. And Boaz went up to the gate, and immediately he found the Redeemer, right? This is God's presence. The rabbis say God flew him over there, right? What would it be? What would happen if this guy was out of town? He was in America doing making money, right? Boaz just had a few days to live. He died the next day after he married Ruth, right? He had 2 days to live, right? What's going to happen with Mashiach, right? God flew this guy there. He goes and he finds him right there, right? And he says to him, "Come over here, Ploni Amoni." Ploni Amoni is Mr. X. He doesn't say his name to embarrass him, right? And he went and he sat down. And he took 10 men to advertise the act. Sits down and he sat down. He says, the portion of our field that our brother Elimelech had, Nami sold it, returned from the field of Moab, and I said, I will reveal your ears, saying, buy it, right? Opposite the elders, right? If you do it good, and if not, I'm after you. Tell me, because I'm after you, right? You're the first one, and I'm after you, right? There's no problem. I'll redeem the field. But there's one catch. Ruth, you have to marry Ruth the Moabite. Now, another introduction, another important fact. The Torah says a Moabite convert cannot enter the Jewish people. We had the book of Deuteronomy. A Moabite who converts, you're not allowed to marry them. Why? Because when we were going out of Egypt, there are cousins. They had to say they would survive because of the mercy, because of Abraham, and they didn't come out to meet us with food and water, right? They're not kindness. Don't marry them, even if they're converts, right? But there was a not well-known oral tradition, right, that only applied to male Moabites and not females. Moavi v'lo Moabit, but that was not well known. How often do you think it happened that a female Moabite wanted to marry a Jew? It didn't happen very often, right? They didn't know about it. Even 3 generations later, King David kills Goliath, and Saul promises his daughter as a wife. And the court of Saul, there was a big controversy. How can you have your daughter marry King David? He's a descendant of Ruth, a Moabite. So one guy gets up with a sword and he says, if you don't believe me, I'm going to cut you with a sword. I have a tradition from Samuel the prophet, Moabite and not Moabite, male and not female. And that's when it was settled. So this guy Tov, he didn't know this law. He didn't know that. Boaz knew the law, but he didn't. Or even if he did know, possibly he didn't know. He didn't fool him, but he didn't want to marry her. He didn't want to marry someone a convert. Why should I have a lot of lineage. Why should I marry a low convert? Why should I marry her? Right? He didn't want to marry her, whatever it was. So Elimelech said, but Boaz tells Elimelech, he says to him, you want to marry? Verse 5, he says to him, the day when you acquired the fields from Naomi and from Ruth the Moabite, the wife of the dead, she was the wife of Machlon, you acquired her to establish the name of the dead on his house. I said to you before, when they would redeem a field, if it was a widow, so the guy who redeemed the field would marry the widow, similar to Yibum, in order that you should remember that was a field that belonged to Machlon. Remember the dead's name on his field, right? And the girl says, what? I should marry a Moabite? I'm not able to redeem her. I can't do it. I'll destroy my inheritance. You do it. Don't call me. I'll call you. I'm out. Right? I can't do it, right? And this was the custom in Israel when they would establish something. They would take off. You have a custom. We have a kinyan called chalifin. We I pick up your handkerchief and you acquire my field, right? At a wedding, the bride would pick up a handkerchief to make a kinyan on the marriage contract, right? They would do it with a handkerchief. They used to do it with a shoe. They would take off the shoe and give it to him. They give it to his friend, and this is the way it was done. And the goal said to Boaz, you buy it and take off a shoe, right? And Boaz said to the elders, all the people, you are witnesses that I have acquired everything to Elimelech and all the Killian and Machlon, all the fields from Naomi. And Ruth the Moabite, the wife of Machlon, here calls her his wife. You see that her original conversion was valid because she was married to Machlon. He's called the wife of Machlon. You see that from here, right? I've acquired for a wife to establish the name of the dead on his inheritance, like as in Yibum. And he should not, his name shall be called off from his people, right? From the gate of his place, you are witnesses. And the people said, and the gate of all the elders said, we are witnesses, right? May God, this woman who's giving into your house, like Rachel and Leah. Notice then chose Rachel first. Who's talking here? The tribe of Judah. Judah was the sons of Leah. Even the sons of Leah recognized that Rachel was the main wife, right? And who was their father? Lavan wasn't such a great guy. So even though Ruth was the daughter of a Moabite king, right? But like Rachel and Leah, that built both in the house of Israel and do valor in Ephrath, right? In the house of Bethlehem. And the house should be like the house of Peretz. Gave birth to Tamar. Here we're bringing Tamar and Peretz again, who are the ancestors of Boaz, right? From the seed which God gave you from this girl. And Boaz took Ruth, and he became his wife, and she came upon her, and she got pregnant, right? And she had a son. What did the people say? This old rabbi, right? He has such a good reputation. He was a judge for so many years. In his old age, he goes up to some girl, a Moabite girl, wants to marry a Moabite girl. I'm sure nobody attended the wedding, right? Next morning, he dies. What did the people say? Serves him right for marrying a Moabite girl. I'm sure no one attended the funeral. Right. But he was supposed to die. He was an old man. God preserved him for this one purpose, to be the father of the Davidic dynasty. Right? And the women said to Naomi, bless Hashem who has not kept back you, the Redeemer, until today, right? And they called his name in Israel. He will hold you and can support you in your old age, because your daughter-in-law that you love has given birth to him. He's better to you than 7 sons. She's better to you than 7 sons, right? And Naomi took the child, and she was his nurse, right? And the people said, a son was brought to Naomi. He said, Naomi can't have children. The son was brought to Naomi, right? And they called his name Ovad. He's the father of Yishai, the father of David. And now the book of Ruth ends with the lineage. These are the generations of Peretz. Peretz gave birth to Chetzron. Chetzron gave birth to Ram. Ram gave birth to Aminadab. Aminadab gave birth to Nachshon. So Nachshon ben Aminadab was the prince of Judah, right? In the times he was the brother-in-law of Aaron, right? He jumped into the Red Sea until up to his nose and it split. Very great man. And he had 4 sons. One son was Elimelech. One son was the father of Naomi. That was Elimelech's brother. 3rd son was Tov, the guy who didn't want to marry. And the 4th son was Salma. And Salma gave birth to Boaz. That was Boaz's father. They were 4 brothers, right? And Boaz gave birth to Ovad. And Ovad gave birth to Yishai. And Yishai gave birth to David. Who wrote this book? Who could get away with this story? Only Samuel the prophet. How can anyone get away with it? You know, King David, you know his grandmother was the daughter of Yasser Arafat. Anyone can get away with that, right? No one can get away with that, right? Only King David. And she's called the mother of royalty. She lived a very long life, Ruth. She lived to see her great-great-grandson, Shlomo, King Solomon. We find Solomon had on his table sat the mother of Malchus, of kingdom. It was Ruth, right? Right? And what's the lesson we're supposed to learn from here? How one has to accept the Torah. Ruth left everything behind, her family, her religion, to become part of the Jewish people, right? To go with an old lady, she'll die through nothing, right? Because she wanted to be a Jew. So we have to come on Shavuot and accept the Torah the same way, right? Another thing we learned from here, the idea of kindness, right? See how important kindness is, right? Torah begins with kindness and it ends with kindness. In the beginning of the Torah, God becomes a tailor. He makes clothing for Adam and Eve. And the Torah, he's a member of the burial society. He buries Moshe, right? Elimelech didn't want to do kindness, right? He left his people. He was dead, right? Orpah didn't do kindness. She left her mother-in-law. She was out. Ruth left everything and she came to be part of the Jewish people. And for her mother-in-law, take care of her mother-in-law, right? And Boaz, an old man, he marries this convert. Who else would marry her, right? They didn't know about the law of Moabite, right? He's the only one who knew the law, right? No one else would marry her, and he marries her, right? He died the next day. God wanted him to live that one day in order that he should be the Rav Shanta. So we see how important kindness is, and the most important lesson we learn is this is an example of how this wonderful, great woman, right, accepted upon herself the Torah. We come to Shavuot, we accept upon ourselves the Torah. It's the example of Ruth to teach us how we have to go about accepting the Torah. Thank you very much.